All right.
Hey, good evening, Brent. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's fun and good to talk to some different people.
Yeah. So I'm Russell Lord. I'm the curator of photographs at the New Orleans Museum of Art, and I'm here with.
I'm Dr. Brent Goehring. I'm a professor of geology and environmental sciences at Tulane University in New Orleans.
Thanks. And Brent is also one of the authors in Tina Freeman Lamentations, a book that accompanies an exhibition that is still up at the New Orleans Museum of Art, even though the museum is closed. And we're in the process of getting a portion of that exhibition online on the Google Arts and Culture platform. But we were delighted to have Brent's insights in the catalog. And then Brent also participated with us in a panel discussion on opening weekend of the exhibition back in September of 2019. And obviously, a lot has happened very recently in the world since then. But before that, after I last saw you, you went somewhere, and it looks like you're still there.
Uh,
Where are you right now, Brent?
yeah, I wish I was still there with my family, of course. But so well, I took this photo. This is Mount Murphy in Antarctica, in West Antarctica. And it's a large volcano that is next to Thwaites Glacier. And so you may have seen Thwaites Glacier in the news as of late because it is on the precipice of contributing quite a bit of water to the global oceans. And that has some significant interest for those of us living in New Orleans and other coastal areas.
So tell us how not to be too alarmist, but how close are we to that precipice for Thwaites Glacier? What's happening to it?
Yeah, so we honestly don't quite know how close we are to the precipice. We may be 100 yards, we may be 1 yard. And that's why I and about 100 other people went to Thwaites Glacier this past winter, or Antarctica's summer, to find that out. And so we essentially have to diagnose and get all the critical kind of medical history of Thwaites Glacier to find out what it might do in the future.
And that's by you do that you're essentially predicting its future by looking at its past. Do I have that correct?
Yeah, so that's one of the things we do, and that's what I do. So I study what Thwaites Glacier did in the past, and so I'm what's referred to as a paleo glaciologist. So I study the past
Great.
history of glaciers. So it's a fun term, and you'll not see it in any dictionary. But so the group that I was with and I lead, we essentially look at the medical history of Thwaites Glacier. So we look at it on land. There's another team that looks at it in the ocean. And then, like any medical doctor would ask you what's been going on today or what's going on today. And so things we're looking at is the glacier producing earthquakes? How much of the glacier is floating? How thick is the glacier? And so really just getting an idea of what it's done in the past, what it's doing today, and then putting that into models to better forecast what it might do.
And so do you already at this point do you have a good sense of what it's done in the past?
We know a little bit about what it's done, and ironically, we know what it's done in the deeper past. What
Yeah,
we don't know is we don't know what it's done in the last few thousand years. So we have a good sense of what it did kind of 20,000 years to 10,000 years ago.
uh-huh.
We don't really know what it's done kind of 5,000 years to
I
today.
see.
And so that's what we went to Antarctica to figure out.
Okay. And in that distant past, has it ever reduced in size the way that we're seeing it now, to your knowledge?
Well, certainly coming from the last ice age, it was up to 300 meters thicker than it is right now where we were. But, we had ice sheets over New York that were 2 kilometers thick. So, we know that glaciers were bigger in the last ice age, but we know that most glaciers were also bigger as recently as 100 years ago. What
Uh-huh.
we really don't know is, was it ever smaller? And so we
Uh-huh.
need to understand, if it was smaller, how did it regrow? What are the conditions that let it regrow?
I see. Okay. And so who else was with you on this trip?
Yeah, so I was with a pretty diverse group of, in this case, we're all PhD scientists. So it was people from the University of Maine and from University of California, Berkeley. We had 2 drilling engineers from the University of Wisconsin. So these are mechanical engineers that design very special drills to drill through the glacier and then collect the rock underneath. So really, really smart people. And then we had a field mountaineer that kept us safe, and he's a vital and critical part of the team, not only for our safety, but for camaraderie, and just has really good ideas all around.
Wow, that's amazing. And so where do you stay? Like where do you live while you're there?
Yeah, so if you look at the kind of the photo behind me,
Yeah.
we stay down on the glacier.
Okay.
And yep, so we are sitting, or we're not sitting, well, sometimes we're sitting, but we are sleeping on floating ice, actually. And so this ice, in parts of it, we can actually track with a GPS unit, and we can see the tide come in and out. And so the ice goes up and down. And we sleep in tents on small cots, so we don't have to sleep directly on the snow. But we're in tents the entire time.
And for how long were you there?
So we were at this site for about 3 weeks.
Okay.
But it takes about 3 weeks to get out to the site.
Uh-huh.
And it takes another 2 weeks to leave the site, go through the main U.S. Logistical hub, and then get home.
And what is that transportation like? Is it ski mobile to boat to plane?
Well, fortunately, we didn't have to take a boat anywhere. So we rely on either U.S. Air Force or New Zealand Air Force transport from New Zealand to Antarctica.
Uh-huh.
And then within Antarctica, we work very closely with the U.S. Air Force, flying on very specially equipped large propeller planes that have skis on them. And so they can land on snow runways. And then from there, we take another set of smaller planes with skis.
So how many? I remember one of the things that you mentioned in the panel discussion, that you and other scientists who are doing what you do suffer from climate guilt, which is the idea that you're using all of this jet fuel and these resources. So tell me a little bit about that, and how many planes is it to get from New Orleans, Louisiana to Kuwait?
Yeah, so let's see if I count my flights. So I didn't have the most efficient route to Los Angeles, so that was 2 flights. And then I had 2 more flights to get to Christchurch, New Zealand.
Yeah.
And then I had a single flight from Christchurch to Antarctica. And then it was 3 more flights within Antarctica. So yeah, the climate guilt is real. And what's interesting, especially with the large U.S. Air Force planes, is the engines are such that they actually can't shut them down, because there's a risk of them not turning back on if the weather is too cold.
Right.
Yeah. So you leave the plane and get on the plane with the engines running. It's an incredibly interesting experience. It's very loud. It can be intimidating because you have these propellers spinning, 10 feet from your head, but you see just, the exhaust plume, and, you just, they're burning fuel, but we have no choice. We run the engines, or the plane gets stuck and we potentially get stuck.
Right.
But, so there's the entire process. We're maximizing the number of people we transport, the amount of cargo we transport, to make it as efficient as possible. And there's a fantastic team of people that work for various defense contractors that have just incredible logistical experience to maximize all of these efficiencies.
That's incredible. Yeah. So how did you get to this subject? You grew up in Portland, is that right?
I grew up a little bit about a half hour south of Seattle.
Seattle, right? Okay.
And about 45 minutes from Mount Rainier. And so I went into college as a material scientist and engineer, and I needed to take a distribution science, and took intro to glaciers. And I'd say 2 weeks in, I was hooked. And so I grew up looking at Mount Rainier and its glaciers. I grew up an avid skier. And I certainly, even over the 20 years living in Seattle before I was a college student, saw the snow levels, keep decreasing and decreasing. And so climate change was, certainly something I was aware of, but I never thought I could make a career out of it, and, get to go and essentially be a mountaineer and be a scientist and do these amazing things. So I'm incredibly fortunate to get to do this as a profession.
Right. And naturally, New Orleans was the best place for you
of course.
to study what you study.
Of course.
You go weekends around here, I assume.
Yeah, I mean, it is ironic we say that. There's an amazing connection to studying what Antarctic glaciers will do in the future, just because we are so vulnerable to sea level change. And
Right.
so, I think there's probably a greater percentage of the New Orleans population that understands climate change and understands sea level rise than I would say in many other parts of the United States or North America, just
Right.
because we see it. I mean, we see these reports of, every time there's a king tide in the summer, parts of if you go to the Lumcon facility, for example, which is the Louisiana University's Marine Consortium, it floods. And so they had to build it on stilts, not because mean sea level has risen that dramatically, but because it's that plus the tides, the facility floods now. And so there's just this
Right.
acute sense of what's going on.
Yeah, and that, of course, I mean, it dovetails nicely. I didn't even give an overview of Tina Freeman's Lamentations exhibition, but that's exactly what it's about. And when you say that, I think a diptych like this, the show is entirely comprised of these diptychs. One half of the diptych will be Arctic or Antarctic. This one I think is in the Weddell Sea, actually. So this is Antarctica.
Very likely, yep.
And then this one is near Avoca Island, or near Morgan City in Louisiana. And you just think, like, if that disappears into the water, you don't need much more water here before this is completely submerged. And I think Tina recognized that, and I know a lot of visitors have responded to it, and it's great that we're speaking a language that a lot of people here know and understand. So.
Yeah, and I think photographs are such a powerful way to do it. And it was really interesting after the the kind of roundtable thing this past fall, just talking with the variety of audience members and just kind of hearing from them, and large parts of the community that I, as a relatively new New Orleanian, have never interacted with before. But it was really refreshing and fun to talk to people about a huge variety of topics, and talking about what I do and what they do, and listen to people who run sport fishing charters, or it really doesn't matter. They've all got their own experiences,
Yeah.
and I just don't have that baseline that other residents have here.
Yeah, and me too. I mean, I've been here 8 years now, and I've seen the flooding, and I've learned a lot. But this show has taught me immensely about the challenge that we face, and it's great having conversations with people like you. We hope to continue this conversation online.
Yeah.
2 last questions for you.
Yeah.
What was the most amazing thing you saw on the trip?
Okay.
And then what did you eat? And are you still eating the same thing now that you have quarantine?
Okay. So, most amazing thing I saw. I hadn't previously flown or been on ice shelf and glaciers of this scale. And so flying over them was pretty amazing. And there were cracks in the ice shelf, and, naturally occurring cracks that allowed you to see all the way down to the ocean. Which was pretty amazing to see. The other amazing thing was, and it's really more hilarious, was watching a colony of penguins running from one open sea ice area to another, and just watching them for about a half hour as they're running across the sea ice. That was just hilarious and pretty amazing. But and then as far as food goes, no, thank goodness I'm not still eating that food. So. In the past, the U.S. Antarctic program has been incredibly good at providing us with good food, because they realize, an army of scientists marches on their stomach. This year, because the field site was so remote, every pound counted. And so this year we were limited to dehydrated meals and ramen and, packet tuna and packet chicken. And it was rough.
Yeah.
So I'm, fortunately got to go to a couple of nice dinners once I got home and enjoy the New Orleans food scene.
Right.
And then thank goodness my wife is an incredible chef. So we've been doing okay and getting creative with our pantry.
Good. Well, we hope that we're all enjoying the New Orleans restaurant scene again soon. And
yeah, absolutely.
Be safe and stay healthy. And
likewise.
Thanks for taking the time to talk today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was fun.
All right. Take care, Brent.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.